Hey guys, I'm Cedillo. I'm an attorney here in Dallas, Fort Worth, and I'm a clinical professor of law at the SMU Dedman School of Law. Recently, I've been doing some television interviews and some radio interviews regarding the separation of parents from their children. And my daughter actually asked me if I could put something down in a wider fashion as opposed to doing everything piecemeal so she could kind of get a better understanding. So she suggested that we do a video. So we're going to do that, and this is what it's going to cover. We'll be doing a series of these smaller vignettes to talk about different issues. So if you're watching this and you have questions about something, feel free to ask those, and perhaps we can do them in a later video. As you guys know, a few weeks ago, the administration issued the zero tolerance policy, which basically maintains that everyone that crosses the border without inspection is going to be arrested and charged with the misdemeanor crime of entry without inspection, including families with their minor children. The zero tolerance policy was implemented full scale a few weeks ago, but prior to that they actually had a pilot program of sorts down in El Paso where they kind of vetted this out before they actually rolled out the full thing, so they knew what was about to happen, they being the administration. There's been a lot of talk back and forth about whose fault it is in terms of who's separating the children. The reality is the administration has implemented the zero tolerance policy, and there's two major triggers to why the children are actually separated. When they are arrested by Border Patrol, it's actually a civil action. They're in civil detention. When they are sent from there to the federal marshal's office, it becomes a criminal matter. And that is the first triggering event, which requires the separation of children from their parents. Federal marshals are not going to take these children into custody, just the parents. So with that, most of these folks are fleeing Central American countries, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, those three countries mainly, and coming here requesting asylum. With that, there is a major law that kind of comes into play, the TVPRA. It is the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2008. And what that does, it was a totally bipartisan effort to stop human trafficking among children, unaccompanied minors, coming from non-contiguous countries, meaning any country other than Canada and Mexico. It treated these unaccompanied minors in a different way. It gave them an opportunity to go through Health and Human Services and then be placed with a sponsor and ultimately seen before an immigration judge. Whereas minors, unaccompanied minors from Canada and Mexico can be repatriated to their countries immediately if there's no showing of the prima facie case for asylum. Children, unaccompanied minors from these other countries are given the opportunity to basically see an immigration judge. So those two things kind of trigger what's happening here. That first event, separating the parents from the children because they go into criminal custody, that along with the designation of those minors as unaccompanied triggers the TVPRA and has that separation occurring at that point. So this is where we are. What we have seen over the past few weeks when they rolled it out was just a tremendous outpouring and outcry of emotional situations. The TVPRA was generally specifically geared towards 16, 17-year-olds who are coming to this country as unaccompanied minors and dealt with along those lines. But the TVPRA also affects now, with what's happened, 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-olds who are taken from their parents and separated. And prior administrations have dealt with that same issue. For about 5 minutes, the Obama administration said, there's no way we can do this. This administration has decided this was the tack they were going to take. And then a few days later, because of the blowback that they were receiving, the president signed an executive order saying that they were not going to separate families, but the zero tolerance policy would remain in effect. So, a couple of things that are of concern. One judge has issued a reunification order saying that all of the children that were 5 and younger that were separated from their parents, that they be reunified by today. He basically said, I'm going to keep that in place, that the government needs to do this, and even though they haven't. There's about 104 that they've identified as unaccompanied minors that are 5 and younger. And I believe that 34 or 35 of the actual children are going to be reunified with their parents. And then on Thursday, there's going to be a status hearing from that same judge to determine what's going on with the rest of those children who've been separated. So that's kind of where we are with respect to that. Another settlement or law, another court that kind of comes into play is the Flores settlement. The Flores settlement came out of a class action in the 80s, which basically part of it came to the realization that children should not be detained for lengthy periods of time. And with that, the government and this class action class settled up and said, we won't hold children longer than 20 days. Anything beyond that is wrong, and we're not going to do it. So that's where the Flores settlement was. This administration, immediately after retracting the separation, went to the Flores court and basically said they wanted a modification, modifying it to allow them to hold children longer than the 20 days. And there was language that suggested that this new court that ordered the reunification trumped the other court. And of course, this court said no, it does not. Actually ruled either today or yesterday, saying that the two courts were in unison, and that the government had misconstrued or misstated, what was going on. So it's a situation where they can't allow that to happen. But the problem is, you kind of have to redefine or define reunification. Some of these parents are going to be held for lengthy periods of time in custody for their asylum hearings, and the children, if reunified, will actually be in detention for lengthy periods of time. So you could see whole families being detained for months and months, perhaps even years, before they actually finalize their asylum claims. So those are issues that are coming up and that we need to be very leery of and aware of and respond to. So with that said, lots of people are saying or suggesting that, why don't they just come over legally and do it right? Some people don't have the ability to do it in the form or fashion that some people would like. In all honesty, most of these people are making asylum claims from these countries, and the basis for that, a lot of it has to do with fleeing gang activity, fleeing domestic abuse, which the courts have carved out exceptions for. Recently, Attorney General Jeff Sessions came back and said it's almost impossible to claim asylum based on domestic abuse and or gang activity. So we're starting to see that start to trickle down, and those asylum claims are going to be dismissed on those bases. I mentioned earlier, I'm a clinical professor at SMU. Back in March, I had the opportunity to take 6 students down to Carnes Family Detention Facility to help the detainees, mainly women and children, with their asylum claims. There was one in particular that was just incredibly sad. A lady had fled El Salvador about 8 or 9 years ago. She started receiving phone calls that she needed to join this group and go with them. She hung up until they got on the phone and threatened her 8-year-old son, said they were going to kill him if she didn't show up and go with them. So she did. They took her to a prison and gave her $35, told her to go in. The man was going to come to her, hug her, and act like I believe she was his wife, and she was to give the money over to him. And that's what she did, and she did it for the next 2 or 3 months. Then they started telling her that she needed to come up with $50 of her own every month, and she told them she couldn't do it. She just didn't have the ability to make that happen. So they told her only option was to take drugs into the jail. They secreted some drugs into her body, told her to go in and take it to him, and she got caught. And with that, she was given 10 years. She served 8 years. Her son grew up from 8 years to 16 without knowing her, raised by his grandmother. And as soon as she gets out, she goes home and starts receiving those same phone calls from the gangs. She immediately fled, and this was just a few days prior to us having interviews with her in Carnes Detention Facility. The unfortunate part of all that was she's probably going to be denied asylum because of the felony that what she was convicted of, which was totally under duress, but unfortunately may not be an exception to what's going on. So I just want to emphasize that these individuals aren't just leaving because it's tough in their country. They're leaving because they're truly in situations where they have been, their life is being threatened. She was from El Salvador. Last year, 6,000 people were killed in El Salvador. It's a country of 6 million people, and 6,000 murders occurred there. So when the gangs threaten you, it's very real. And these people are fleeing with their children. I don't know who, in their right mind, if they care anything about their children, wouldn't do the exact same thing. And now to have a situation where we're going to send them back and not afford them the opportunity to take advantage of our asylum laws is, it's close to criminal, and it's something that we need to be very aware of, and make sure that, especially what's happening with respect to our kids and the separation of our 1, 2, 3-year-olds from their parents, this can't happen again. And the outcry has to continue to be there at every point. So I applaud all the efforts of the individuals who've actually gone forward and rallied against this. Today, incredible stuff on Raíces. They were the actual host organization that hosted us when we went down to the Carnes detention facility. They had received pledges of donations of about $20 million. And today, they were going to use those monies to pay for some of the bonds for the women who've been detained because of this current policy. So for all you individuals, you got to be aware of what's happening, what's going on, and not just listen to perhaps the one station that you might be listening to get your information, and realize what's truly happening. The next little vignette that we're going to do, we're going to talk about the detention facilities themselves, which are, majority of them are privately for-profit entities, and that's a real concern and consideration that many of us need to have. So thank you so much for joining us today. Like I said, we'll probably put this on our YouTube channel, so look for that if you didn't have an opportunity to see it, and then comment with questions that you guys might have, and we'll be happy to address those over the next few days. So thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you real soon. Have a wonderful day.